Okay, so we did imaginative writing as a newspaper article. So I'll start. Charlie Gordon, age 37, lived in New York City and worked at a factory. His employer, Mr. Donegan, and some of his co-workers were Joe Carp and Franco Morelli. He went to school for slow adults and his teacher was Miss Kinnian. Later in that year, he was admitted to an experiment to make him gain intelligence. As the classes with Miss Kinnian did not seem to be working, Miss Kinnian chose Charlie Gordon to be involved in the experiment because he was dedicated to his work and tried very hard. She could tell he wanted to get smarter.
As Charlie was on this experimental journey, he met a little mouse named Algernon who had undergone the same surgery Charlie was going to do, and they became instant friends. The doctors who invented the surgery and experiments were Dr. Strauss and Dr. Niemer. Some of the experiments or tests Charlie had to do were things such as ink block testing and solving mazes. Charlie had to solve the mazes on paper, and Algernon had to solve them in his cage. Algernon beat Charlie before he had the surgery, but afterward, over time, Charlie started adapting skills and started beating Algernon. Algernon started to lose his skills and soon he passed away. After that, Charlie also started to rapidly lose his skills and soon became back to how he was before the operation.
As reporter Derek Jeter listened to Charlie's story and it amazed me so much that I had to write a paper. Unfortunately, Charlie just died before this completed story got published. This is the story of hope, determination, and perseverance.
The story starts after the experiments when he moved to Oklahoma City, where he lived in a small one-bedroom, one-bathroom apartment. He was determined to find a job that brought him happiness. When he was exploring the city, he found a newly formed company called Boeing, a company that worked with building and inventing commercial airplanes that had just built a factory. He realized they needed workers for this newly formed company, so he applied for a job as a janitor.
One morning, Charlie recalled his phone ringing. He picked up the phone and was frightened by a low, raspy voice that said, "Is this Charlie Gordon?" Charlie replied with yes. The man then went on to introduce himself as Mr. Finnegan and informed Charlie that he has received the janitor job and he was to report to work at 7 p.m. and work until 4 a.m. Charlie was exceedingly happy, and he promised Mr. Finnegan that he would work his hardest.
He reported in for work. When he was shown around, he instantly fell in love with the place. He worked all through the night to make the place spotless. When Mr. Finnegan came in at 4 in the morning, he was amazed to find how clean the place was. He immediately set out to meet Charlie. When he found Charlie, he told him how amazed he was. Charlie was able to tell him about his childhood obsession with airplanes. After hearing all Charlie knew, Mr. Finnegan decided he should put him into his idea committee, which was a committee of 10 people who thought up ideas for inventions of new airplanes. Charlie was so excited, but he couldn't accept the job because he couldn't read or write, and so Mr. Finnegan gave him an assistant to help him.
Charlie kept his job for 18 years and made ideas for planes we still use today. Over time, the pain and the effects of the surgery and experiments he had received wore him down to the point where he had to resign and take a simpler job. He became a busboy at a coffee shop called The Coffee Spot, which is where I met Charlie, and this is where he told me his story. Unfortunately, I learned on May 17, 1984, Charlie was crossing the road at nighttime, not able to see, and mistakenly walked across the train tracks and was hit by an oncoming train. He was instantly paralyzed and died due to complications of his paralysis.
It's amazing how a person can go from being simple-minded to having intelligence in a short while. Charlie Gordon has gone through much more in about 2 years during the experiments and surgery than any other human being has in a lifetime. He spent a full life with people who loved him and helped him. This is the final report of the amazing